The Home Scale Forest Garden is brought to you by Brookfield Renewable, a provider of renewable power, supports public television, reminding the public to make safety a priority, know the risks, use caution in and around water. Information available at safewaters.com.
Since 1979, Adirondack Fragrance has offered artisan-made, place-based fragrance products made from our region's unique botanicals, providing aromas inspired by the mountains, forests, and fields. AdirondackFragrance.com.
And by Richard and Deborah McSherry, the Northern New York Community Foundation, and by these additional sponsors. Closed captioning sponsored by Reeds Incorporated.
Welcome to the Home Scale Forest Garden. I'm Lorraine O'Donnell with Danny Baker, creator of the Enchanted Edible Forest Garden and author of the book, The Home Scale Forest Garden, on which this series is based. In these 8 episodes, we are visiting Danny's garden in northern New York at different times of the year. We're also taking a peek at a subtropical garden in Florida. Well, it's mid-April and we're continuing our spring chores.
First up on the agenda, it's transplanting chamomile and licorice.
Oh, well, we're all familiar with chamomile tea and licorice candy, but what are some of the virtues of having these plants in the garden beyond just flavoring?
Well, their flowers attract beneficial insects and both thrive in dry ground. Plus, these plants pull up nutrients that benefit other plants. Most herbs accumulate many nutrients. When they decay, those nutrients become available to surrounding plants, as well as benefiting humans when we consume them. Today we're going to transplant some chamomile sets that we planted in March. So I have a yogurt cup, a 6-ounce yogurt cup that I cut some holes in the bottom for drainage. And I'm going to gently squeeze, this is individual cells. So I'm going to gently squeeze the bottom of a cell to loosen the roots a little bit, and then holding the top, pull it out. So this is a nice root mass here, not overgrown. I'm going to take some good potting soil and fill the cup halfway, lay that set in, and then fill the other side with the potting soil. Tap it to help it settle. And that's it. Now, I'm going to label each of these with a stick that says, a popsicle stick that says chamomile, just so I know what I've got. And we'll be transplanting, we'll let them fill out in these cups for a month or 2, and then we'll transplant them into the garden later in the summer. In addition to labeling the pots, I always like to keep a written record of what I've done. So if I lose one of these, I know I had so many pots and I can figure out which one I lost the label for. Now we're going to transplant some wild licorice sets. So this is a little different than the chamomile. The chamomile had individual cells. This does not. So we're going to tease apart the roots of these plants. I'm going to start by picking up some of the soil with, let's see how we're going to do this. Okay, I'm going to pick up there are 3 plants here. So very gently, I'm going to hold each plant where the foliage meets the ground and pull it apart. So that's 1, and 2, there's a root, okay. Now I'm going to take the cup, like we did with the chamomile, fill it halfway, change hands, and lay the plant in there with the roots extending downward to the extent possible. Fill it in, tap it to settle. There's one. Do another one. Filling it halfway. taking the plant. Roots are very vulnerable to being dried out with air and sunlight. So it's important not to expose the roots to air if you can avoid it, or if you have to, as short a time as possible. Okay, so that's the wild licorice. Now when we're done, we're going to label everything like we did with the chamomile. So this is licorice, licorice, licorice. Now that these plants are all potted up, it's time to water them. Once they're saturated, I'm going to put them in a place. These have been outside already, so I'm going to put them back outdoors in a shady spot. And I'm going to wait until the surface of the soil dries out before I rewater, because you need to give the roots an opportunity to search for water. That's what makes them grow. If you keep the soil saturated, the roots won't have to do any work and they'll stay stunted. So let the surface dry out, rewater, and then in about a month or two, when the roots have filled out these cups, it'll be time to transplant them into the edible forest. Many plants can be propagated from seed, like chamomile and licorice, but plants that clump as they grow with a thick root, like comfrey, or plants that grow close together, like chives, can be propagated by taking a chunk and transplanting it.
What about rhubarb?
Yes, rhubarb has a thick root that can be propagated much the same way. You can take a chunk of it and just transplant it.
Let's see how it's done.
This is a good time of year to propagate rhubarb. You can grow rhubarb from seed, but it's a lot more efficient to just take a chunk of an existing plant and transplant it somewhere else. That's what I'm going to do. So here you want to just go straight down. Rhubarb has a thick root, which I think you'll see in a moment. You want to get down under it. There we go. And let's see what we have here. Okay, so this is a chunk of, ooh, look at that. See the root? So this is a chunk of the rhubarb root. There are actually 3 or 4 different plants in this chunk. And there, by the way, that's the chunk. So look at how thick the root is. So I think I'm going to divide this into 2. So I'm going to take the shovel, oops, and hopefully I'll be able to do this, yes. All right, so this is 1 and this is 2. It's debatable whether, I don't think these will, without a bud, I don't think they'll root. Let's take these and move them to a new spot. This is a good spot for the rhubarb, so I'm going to first clear away the chips. Now I'm just going to dig a hole big enough for that little bit of root. So look at the beautiful soil here. Put that in there, take the quackgrass away, and I'm going to put the soil back in, pack it down a bit, a little bit of water. The soil's very moist, but the water helps to put the roots in better contact with the soil. So it's good to always give some water, even when the soil is very moist. I'm gonna pour the rest of this in there. Beautiful. I'm gonna put the wood chips back. And then I'm gonna add some semi-composted wood chips in a donut around the outside. That will provide additional nutrition and also stop some weeds from growing up around the rhubarb while it's trying to get established.
Rhubarb takes me back to my childhood. It seemed like every family in northern New York had a rhubarb patch in their backyard. So we've transplanted chamomile and licorice and propagated rhubarb, but we're not done yet.
That's right, we still have to prune our grapes. When you prune grapes, there are fewer bunches, but the grapes are bigger. And as you clear out excess foliage, you allow more light to come in and you have better air circulation. This is a grapevine that I trained to go along this high wire. I'm going to explain. So this trunk, when the grape was first growing, any side shoots that grew up the trunk, I broke off until the trunk reached this height. And then I let the two, these are called cordons, grow out, and I tied them to this wire until their tendrils actually grabbed it. And now it's self-supporting on the wire. The trunk I trained up with this stake until it attached itself to the high wire. So today, I'm just going to do a little bit of pruning. First, I'm going to prune this. This is a dead trunk, and I'm going to prune this out, and I'm going to leave this one. So in the North Country, where it gets very cold in the winter, it's a good idea to train two trunks to come up. So if one of them gets killed by the weather, or if a rodent decides to cut through it, you still have another one that's viable. So this one I'm going to let grow this year and train it out as well. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to prune some of these canes. So eventually, this is dead, so I'm cutting that out. Eventually, we're going to have the canes to just two buds. So one bud is here and one bud is here. But because we're still having frost, I'm not going to cut it back that far today. If I do that and we have a hard frost and the leaves have started to leaf out, the leaves will be killed and there won't be any fruit from this cane. So I'm going to give it maybe 5 buds and just prune these around 4 or 5 buds out. So even if the outer buds start to leaf out, they'll still be, and we have a frost, there'll still be plenty of buds left that are viable. Because on the grapevine, the furthest from the cordon are the ones that leaf out first. And then they gradually move in toward the main stem. I'm going to trim a few more, and I'm going to cut out any dead stuff, like this is dead. I'm going to get rid of that. This one's dead. This is from last year. By the way, a mature grapevine, and it takes about 4 years for it to start to be a mature producer, can produce up to 40 pounds of grapes. So that's a lot of grapes for a small plant. All right, I'm going to cut this and cut this. So the other thing to think about is you want to space your canes about 4 inches apart. So these are really too close together. I'm going to cut this one out. And so on average, this is a little more than 4 inches, but there isn't another cane there. So on average, you want them to be about 4 inches apart along the stem. So anything more than that, you want to cut out. Cut out the dead wood, and that's it. And now, sometime in May, when I'm sure that all the frosts are done, I will cut these back to 2 buds. I'll cut each of these back to 2 buds. If I leave them too long, there'll be grapes growing from all these buds, and they won't be as big and plump as they would be if you cut some out.
We're located in northern New York, where we have a 4-season climate. However, forest gardens aren't limited to just a northern climate.
You're right. Forest gardens can thrive in any climate. We visited a subtropical food forest in Jupiter, Florida, where Amanda Pike shared her experience propagating bananas and pruning fruit trees. I'm here in Jupiter, Florida with Amanda Pike, who has this incredible forest garden. And today I'd like to understand how you propagate, like bananas, for example.
So bananas are one of our top crops here in the food forest because they are a staple. They provide pure starch, much like a potato, and when they're unripe. So we're constantly propagating them to have more and ensure production. So to ensure production, you have to have a max of 3 plants per corm, per root ball. So a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. And then you take a shovel and you will pop off any extra pups, baby plants.
A pup is like a sucker?
A sucker.
Okay.
And you gift it. You want to make sure it has some root hair, but this means that Floridians often have plenty of bananas to share.
Amanda, another question I have is when and how do you prune your fruit trees?
So we time the pruning for right after harvest. So we
okay.
just finished mango season. We have 28 different mature mango trees on our property, so it is a tsunami, June through August. Now we're in September, it just finished, and we're gonna be cutting out the lead, which means the branch that goes straight up.
Okay.
My husband takes the bulk of it. We use pole saws mainly to cut out the lead, and we chip it on site. So we drag the limb and chip right onto our bananas. So all the organic matter stays, but we have to let the light through the canopy so that we get maximum fruit.
Amanda, another thing I'm curious about is how and when you plant your bare root trees.
In Florida, we have 2 seasons, rainy season and dry season. And so when the rains start in full earnest,
And when is that?
typically around, our rainy season is called from June to November, but you're not gonna have torrential rain until about September, October. So
like now?
Yes, we get a
Okay.
lot of heavy rains that are very predictable now. And so that's when I prefer to just put my seedlings, my bare rooted trees in the ground. That way nothing is required of me at all. So it tends to be cloudy because of the rain forecast. So the young seedlings are not going to be scorched by the sun.
That's important.
And I can just put them directly in the ground and they're going to be established very fast because of the predictable rain. So that way it saves me time and effort, and it's more environmentally friendly.
The plants are happy.
The plants are happy.
I like the way Amanda times her bare root plantings for when the rains come. So that minimizes her labor. So nature waters the trees instead of her.
What about here in a northern climate? When do you plant bare root trees here?
Well, here in northern New York, we plant our bare root trees in the spring so that they emerge from dormancy naturally as the season warms. I'm going to plant a bare root tree today. It's a very small tree, but it has fairly substantial roots. I don't want to expose the roots to the sun or the air for very long. I have it soaking in some water. So these trees are harvested, bare root plants are harvested after they go dormant in the fall. They're put in a temperature-controlled environment over the winter, and then they're shipped to the buyer this time of year. The water helps to rehydrate the bush or the tree, but you only want to leave it in for 2 hours, no more than 24 hours. So these have been soaking for a couple of hours. I think it's probably rehydrated and it's time to plant. It's a red bud. So a red bud is a nitrogen fixing tree that has edible flowers and pods, and it's a very beautiful tree when it matures and it's covered with those beautiful pink flowers in the spring. So judging by the amount of root mass I have, I'm going to have to dig a fairly sizable hole. So that's what I'm going to do right here. Because we have heavy clay, when you dig a hole with a shovel in heavy clay, you might shear it on the edges, and then the roots have a hard time breaking through. So after I dig the hole to size, I like to take a pitchfork and just puncture the sides so that there's some space for those roots to get in. That's it. Now, next step is to build a mound in the middle that this tree is going to sit on top of, and the roots are going to spread around it. Okay. All right, I'm going to spread these roots out over this little bit of a mound I built, and I'm going to make a hole and push the taproot down a little bit. And see how I'm spreading the roots? And then I'm going to cover them gradually with soil. Okay, very good. Okay, again, I'm not packing it down very much because it is very moist clay soil. And now I'm going to it's not completely filled, but I'm gonna make sure the tree's straight like I want it. And I was paying attention to where it grew before, so that's about where the soil ended up before. So I'm gonna try to hit that mark when I fill in with soil this time. But first, I'm gonna give it a little water to settle what I already put in. All right, that's good. You can see how the soil got washed down a little bit, so that's good. It means it's settling. Okay, now I'm going to build a saucer around it like I did for the other plant that we planted. Okay, I need to go get more water. It's really good to build in some water features in your garden if you can. When we planted this garden, there was standing water in this area all year round. So I knew that the water table was very high and I probably couldn't grow anything, so I dug ponds. And it's great to attract all kinds of wildlife like frogs and turtles and dragonflies, and also great to have a source of water to water your bare root plants when you're planting them in April. Oop, and a frog just jumped in. So I'll just scoop up some water and bring it up. Yeah, so this is pond water, which has got to be more nutritious than tap water anyway. All right. And when it starts to have a little difficulty seeping down, it's probably enough. Besides, we know the soil was very wet. So I'm going to fill in just a little more soil around the stem, and then I'm going to cover it with wood chips and put a trunk guard over it and a stake in this case to hold the trunk guard up, and we'll call it a planted tree. Or this. When you plant a tree, it's good to put the more nutritious soil close to the roots and the clay or the less nutritious soil on the outskirts. That's what I'm doing, and I'm just about done. I'm bending in the tines of this hardware cloth so I can make a stable cylinder, and then I'm going to just slide it over the top. There we go, not too deep. You don't want to press it too deep in the ground because then the roots will go through the metal and then you'll be stuck. You want this to be removable. And I'm going to put a stake in just because this is so tall that the wind might blow it over if I don't put in a stake. So just a stake to hold that vertical. And now for the wood chips. There's that circle. Okay, so these wood chips are going to serve several functions. They're semi-composted, so they're going to provide additional nutrition to the tree. I don't put any nutrition in the hole. I want the tree to adapt to its environment right away. It might grow slower than a tree that has some compost thrown in the hole, but that doesn't bother me. I'd rather it just adapt to the native environment. The wood chips, as I mentioned, not too thick right around the base here, but thicker around the outside, and then just a few to cover the dirt that's surrounding the tree. There we go. And that's good. The other function that these wood chips serve is they're a great insulator. So they're going to hold in the moisture for actually many months. I have planted bare root trees this time of year, had a drought in the summer, and I never had to water them because these chips were so insulating. What I'll do once the season warms up a little, I'll come around and check all my newly planted trees, stick my finger in about that far. If the soil is still cool and moist, I don't have to water. With heavy clay, there's the risk of oversaturating the soil if you water too much. Now, if you have loam or sand, you may have to water a lot more frequently, but here with the wood chips, I rarely have to re-water a seedling the first season. Another function that the wood chips have is they deter weeds from competing with the tree's roots, which are just establishing themselves.
Early spring is such a busy time. In our next episode, we'll visit the garden in late spring where it will be popping with life. I'm Lorraine O'Donnell with Danny Baker. Join us next time on the Home Scale Forest Garden. Thanks for watching.
The Home Scale Forest Garden is brought to you by Brookfield Renewable, a provider of renewable power, supports public television, reminding the public to make safety a priority. Know the risks, use caution in and around water. Information available at safewaters.com.
Since 1979, Adirondack Fragrance has offered artisan-made, place-based fragrance products made from our region's unique botanicals, providing aromas inspired by the mountains, forests, and fields. AdirondackFragrance.com.
And by Richard and Deborah McSherry, the Northern New York Community Foundation, and by these additional sponsors. Closed captioning sponsored by Reeds Incorporated.
Danny Baker's award-winning book, The Home Scale Forest Garden: How to Plan, Plant, and Tend a Resilient Edible Landscape, is available from Chelsea Green Publishing at chelseagreen.com and wherever books are sold.